Okay, so um, I want you to do something for me. I want you to walk into your living room or wherever you keep it and just stand in front of that glass box. You know the one I mean.
The one with the water in it.
The one with the water, the plants. Maybe you got a school of tetras or a bed of fish doing his little patrol around the perimeter.
Mm.
What do you actually see when you look at it?
I think for, what, 90% of people, even people who've been in this hobby for a good while, they see a piece of furniture.
Right.
Or, at best, a pet enclosure. It's basically a wet bird cage.
A wet bird cage. I love that. And that's exactly it. But today, we're going to completely dismantle that perspective. Because if you really, truly want to succeed with a planted tank.
And I mean really succeed.
Yeah, if you want that lush, high-tech, aquascaped look without the constant nightmare of fighting algae, you have to stop thinking of yourself as a pet owner. You need to start thinking of yourself as a deity.
A deity. Wow. Okay, that is a significant promotion from the guy who feeds the fish.
It is. But it comes with a, frankly, terrifying amount of responsibility. Because today's deep dive is based on a really seminal seminar by the biologist and aquatic expert Lada Ponomareva. And her central thesis is, well, it's startlingly simple, but it's also physically profound. An aquarium is a closed universe.
Right, and that distinction, that single word closed, is everything. It changes the entire physics of the environment.
How so?
Well, think about a lake or a river. It's an open system, right? You've got rain falling, which is fresh, soft water. You have groundwater seeping in, bringing minerals up from the bedrock. You have wind churning the surface, pushing oxygen in.
Nature's doing all the work.
Nature provides all the inputs, and nature takes away all the waste through flow and dilution. It's constantly being refreshed.
But in your living room, in that glass box, the system is closed. There's no rain unless you bring the bucket.
No wind unless you plug in the pump.
You are the weather. You are the geology. You are the physics engine for this entire microcosm.
And that really is the hook for today. We're looking at Ponomareva's seminar, and it's from back in 2014. Now, you know how this hobby is. People are always chasing the new thing.
Oh, yeah. The new light, the new filter, the new miracle soil that promises no algae forever.
Exactly. But Ponomareva isn't talking about trends. She's talking about biological imperatives.
The stuff that doesn't change just because a new, fancier LED hits the market.
Not at all. We are talking about biophysics, biochemistry. These are the fundamental rules that governed life 3 billion years ago, and they still govern that 50-liter tank sitting in your hallway. And if you understand these laws, you don't need the latest gadget, you just need knowledge.
So here's our mission for this deep dive. We're moving way beyond tips and tricks. We are not going to tell you which filter brand is on sale or which fish are compatible with shrimp. We're going to unpack the actual engine of a planted tank.
We're going to get our hands dirty, metaphorically.
Metaphorically, yes. We're going to look at the snowflake rule, the really complex chemistry of cation exchange in dirt, and the ancient, brutal chemical warfare that's happening between your plants and algae.
It gets surprisingly violent down there at the microscopic level. It really does.
It's a battlefield. But let's start with this core philosophy that Ponomareva lays out first. She calls it the snowflake rule.
This is such a great concept. It's the idea that no two aquariums are alike. And she means that literally on a biological level.
So even if I try to make them identical?
Even then, you could go to the store, buy 2 identical tanks, same dimensions, same glass, the exact same model of lights, the exact same bags of soil, and plant the exact same tissue culture plants.
Okay, so a perfect control group.
You set them up side by side on the same Saturday morning. You fill them with the same tap water from the same hose. Logically, they should be clones, right? Same inputs, same environment, same results.
You would think, but it doesn't work that way.
It never works that way. She says within weeks, they will diverge completely because an aquarium isn't a static picture you hang on the wall. It's the dynamic biological system.
What's driving that divergence? Is it just random chance?
It's microbiological colonization. It's which specific strains of bacteria happen to land in the filter first, which fungi start pollinizing that piece of driftwood, how the chemistry shifts, minute by minute based on those tiny initial differences.
So we're basically dealing with chaos theory on a micro scale.
Precisely. Small variations in the initial bacterial load lead to massive differences down the line in how the tank matures. So you can't just copy-paste someone else's success.
You can copy their setup.
You can copy the setup, but you cannot copy the process. You have to learn to read the specific, unique tank that's sitting right in front of you. And this leads to her next big idea. An aquarium isn't just an object, it has a lifespan. It has a youth, a maturity, and an old age.
That's a fascinating framework. I mean, usually we think of a tank as just set up and then running, but she views it as a living creature with these distinct life phases.
Yeah, and it changes everything about how you manage it.
Okay, so let's break those down. What characterizes youth in a glass box?
Youth is the startup phase. It's the chaotic teenage years. It's defined by one word: instability.
Ah, yes. The period of maximum panic for most new hobbyists.
Absolutely. The chemistry is swinging wildly. The plants are in shock. They're usually grown immersed, above water in these massive nurseries, and now you've drowned them. They're trying to transition, shedding their old leaves, growing new enzymes.
And the filter isn't ready.
The filter is a ghost town.
Yeah.
The bacterial colonies that process waste, that do the nitrogen cycle, they haven't established a foothold yet. So any little bit of ammonia is just sitting there.
So this is the danger zone. This is where most people quit because their tank turns into just a brown soup of algae and melting plants.
Correct. Your goal as the god of this system, as you put it, is to get through youth as fast as humanly possible without the whole thing crashing. You want to rush towards maturity.
Maturity, that sounds like the goal. That's the sweet spot.
Maturity is balance. It's the promised land. The plants are growing strong. The bacteria are processing ammonia the instant it appears. The water is crystal clear. The system has found its rhythm.
And your job then is what? Just watch.
Your job is to prolong maturity for as long as you possibly can. We're talking years, hopefully. It's about maintaining that perfect balance.
But then comes old age. And that this isn't just about the tank getting a few scratches or the silicone getting a bit old. This is a biological old age.
Yes, this is system degradation. It's when
Yeah.
the whole thing gets clogged up. The substrate gets compacted down into a brick.
Okay.
Anaerobic zones areas with absolutely no oxygen start to form deep in that compacted dirt. The accumulated organic waste, the malm, it just overwhelms the bacteria's ability to process it. The whole thing slides into a slow metabolic collapse.
Wow. So the game, the entire strategy of keeping a successful planted tank is shorten the youth, stretch the maturity as long as possible, and delay the old age.
Precisely. And to do that, you have to understand the foundation. And I mean that literally. We have to talk about what's happening at the very bottom of the tank, the substrate.
This was a huge aha moment for me going through the source material. I think so many of us, myself included, for a long time, just think of gravel or soil as the carpet.
Right. It holds the plants down so they don't float up to the lights, and it looks nice.
That's it.
That is the wet birdcage thinking again.
In a true planted tank, the substrate is not a carpet. It is the digestive system and the bank vault of the entire operation.
Okay, those are two very different, very powerful metaphors. Let's start with the digestive system. Ponomareva is really specific about how you should build this layer to prevent that old age we just talked about.
She is. And this is something a lot of beginners and even some intermediate keepers skip because they don't see it. It's hidden. It's work you do on day one that pays off 3 years later. So what's the secret?
She argues the bottommost layer, the very base that touches the glass, should never be sand or fine soil. It should be a porous material, something like lava rock or pumice.
Lava rock. Okay, why lava? Is it just about taking up volume so you use less expensive soil?
That's a side benefit, but no, the real reason is porosity and flow. You need water circulation. Even at the bottom of a 4-inch deep substrate bed, water needs to move, albeit very, very slowly.
And if you just use sand?
If you use fine sand or a heavy clay-based soil all the way to the glass bottom, it packs tight. Gravity and the water pressure from above compress it into a solid mass. It chokes off all oxygen.
And when oxygen goes away, the bad guys move in. That the idea?
That's when you get the wrong kind of anaerobic bacteria taking over. Now, not all anaerobic bacteria are bad. Some are actually necessary for denitrification, turning nitrate into nitrogen gas. But in a deep, compacted substrate, you get the kind that reduce sulfates, and they produce hydrogen sulfide.
A rotten egg smell.
Exactly. If you've ever pulled up an old plant and the roots were black and slimy and the mud just reeked of sulfur,
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
that is hydrogen sulfide poisoning.
Huh.
That is a clear sign of old age hitting your substrate prematurely. It's highly toxic to plant roots. It literally rocks them in the ground.
So the lava rock creates a sort of a plenum, a breathable foundation for the whole system.
That's a perfect way to put it. It creates a zone where water can slowly trickle through via convection, bringing tiny amounts of oxygen, keeping the right kind of bacteria healthy, and preventing that toxic buildup. It ensures that the digestive system of the tank stays aerobic and functional.
And then on top of that lava, that's where you put the good stuff.
On top of that, you place your nutrient-rich soils. The popular ones are often these tropical soils baked with clay.
Which brings us perfectly to the second metaphor, the bank vault. This involves a term that sounds terrifyingly scientific, cation exchange capacity, usually abbreviated as CEC.
It sounds super complex, but it's actually a beautiful, elegant mechanism. It's the fundamental difference between a dead substrate like sand or gravel and a living soil.
Okay, break it down for us.
Imagine your soil particles, specifically the humus and the clay components, as tiny negatively charged plates, like millions of microscopic negative ends of a magnet.
Okay, so the soil itself has a negative charge.
A strong negative charge. Now, think about the food plants need. What are we always dosing? Magnesium, calcium, potassium, ammonium. In their ionic form in the water, these are all positively charged. They are cations.
And opposites attract.
Opposites attract, exactly. So the high CEC soil acts like a magnet. It literally grabs these positively charged nutrient coins out of the water column and sticks them to its surface. This is the bank vault. The nutrients are deposited for safekeeping.
But why is this better? I mean, why is it better for the nutrients to be stuck to the soil than just floating around in the water where the plants can get them?
Two massive game-changing reasons. The first is security. If all those nutrients are floating freely in the water column, who else can get them?
Algae.
Algae. Algae are simple. They feed almost exclusively from the water column. They don't have complex root systems. They just soak up whatever touches their surface. By locking the nutrients in the soil, you are hiding the money in the vault where only the plants, with their sophisticated root systems, can make a withdrawal.
So you're starving the enemy while you're feeding your army.
It's a supply line strategy. It's brilliant.
That's amazing. Okay, so that's reason one. What's the second?
The second reason is stability. The soil acts as a chemical buffer. It's your savings account. If you're busy one week and you forget to add fertilizer, the soil says, don't worry, I've got some savings, and it releases those cations to the plant roots on demand.
Okay.
But maybe the next week you're feeling guilty and you accidentally overdose the fertilizer, you dump too much in. The soil says, whoa, that's too much floating around, and it grabs the excess, locking it away safely in the bank instead of letting it fuel an algae bloom.
So high CEC soil basically saves you from your own mistakes.
Yeah.
It smooths out the curve between your good weeks and your bad weeks.
It buys you a huge margin of error. Without that bank vault, your tank is living paycheck to paycheck, chemically speaking. Any little disruption, a missed dose, an overdose, it causes a crisis. With a good soil, you have a buffer. You have a savings account.
This leads us perfectly into the next section, because if the soil is the bank, then the water is, I guess it's the atmosphere, the blood, the medium for everything that happens. And Ponomareva drops an absolute bomb here regarding water changes.
Oh, yes. This is usually the most controversial part of her entire philosophy, especially for beginners or, let's be honest, for lazy experts.
She suggests massive regular water changes. We're not talking about the standard 10% a month advice you get at the big box pet store. She says 30 to 50%.
Every single week.
Every week, without fail. I could hear the collective groan from everyone listening. That is a lot of buckets. That is a lot of dechlorinator. Why is the water really getting that dirty? If the filter's working and nitrates are low, why do we need to dump half the tank?
It's not just about dirty in the sense of fish waste and nitrates. Ponomareva uses what I like to call the unknown unknowns argument.
Okay, you have to explain that.
We can test for certain things, right? We can buy a liquid test kit and we can test for nitrates, we can test for phosphates, we can test for KH. But an aquarium is a biological soup.
It's not just a few simple chemicals.
Not even close. There are metabolites being released by the plants. There are hormones being released by the fish. There are phenols leaching from decaying wood, terpenes, allelochemicals. There are literally thousands of complex organic compounds accumulating in that closed system that we have absolutely no way to test for as hobbyists.
We don't even have names for some of them in the hobbyist context. We just know they're there.
Exactly. And we tend to assume that because we can't test for them, they aren't there or they don't matter, but they are building up week after week. And this slow, invisible accumulation of organic waste is what pushes a tank from that beautiful maturity phase into old age. The water becomes, well, old. It's chemically tired. It starts to inhibit plant growth and encourage algae growth.
So the water change isn't just about lowering the nitrates that we can measure. It's a reset button for the entire universe. It's about removing the stuff we can't measure.
It's the rain. Remember the open system. In nature, streams are constantly flushing, rain is constantly diluting. By changing 50% of the water, you are manually removing a huge chunk of those unknowns and resetting the system closer to its baseline. You are mimicking the open system of nature.
You're basically scrubbing the invisible grime out of the atmosphere of your little world.
That's a perfect analogy. And speaking of testing and measuring, she has some very strong opinions on how we should be monitoring this water. First and foremost, she hates the strips.
The little paper test strips. She calls them weather vanes.
Which is a very polite way of saying they're almost useless for collecting actual data. A weather vane tells you the wind is blowing north, but it doesn't tell you if it's a gentle breeze or a Category 5 hurricane.
They give you a vague color, a ballpark, but if you're trying to be the god of this system, you need numbers. You need data. You need liquid drop tests.
You need actual numbers, and she outlines a kind of testing trinity that shifts depending on the age of your tank.
Right. In the youth phase, that chaotic startup period, it's all about survival.
All about survival. You are watching ammonia and nitrite like a hawk. Those are the killers. They should be zero, period. If they aren't, your bacterial filter isn't established and your fish are living in a toxic waste dump.
But once the tank is cycled and you hit that mature phase, the enemies change. Or rather, the focus of your testing changes.
Well, the metrics change, yeah. Now, nitrate and phosphate become your primary focus, but here's the big twist. In a heavily planted tank, you don't want them to be zero.
Which contradicts everything traditional fish keeping tells you. For decades, the goal was zero nitrates.
Correct. For a fish-only tank, zero nitrate is great. It means the system is clean. But for plants, zero nitrate is starvation. Zero phosphate is starvation. These are macronutrients. If they hit zero, your plants stop growing. And as we're going to discuss later, the moment plants stop growing, algae start growing.
So you're actually testing to make sure you have enough of them. You're maintaining low but steady levels.
Yes, exactly. And then there's that invisible relationship that confuses so many people, pH and KH.
Carbonate hardness.
This is basic chemistry, but it's so crucial. KH, or carbonate hardness, is your safety buffer. It's what prevents your pH from swinging wildly all over the place. Ponomareva notes that while plants actually love soft water, meaning low KH, you have to be incredibly careful.
Because if KH drops all the way to zero, what happens?
If it hits zero, there is nothing left in the water to neutralize the natural acids produced by all the biological processes, fish breathing, waste decaying, and your pH can crash. Literally fall off a cliff. It can drop from a healthy 6.8 to a lethal 4.0 overnight.
It turns your tank into an acid bath.
It absolutely does. It will kill everything. So it's a constant balancing act. You want the water soft enough that plants can uptake nutrients easily, but you need just enough carbonate hardness to keep that pH from crashing.
So what's the target?
You typically want a KH of around 3 or 4 degrees, just enough to keep the pH stable where you want it, but low enough to let the plants thrive.
Okay, this is making a lot of sense. So we've built the vault in the dirt, we've reset the atmosphere with our weekly water changes. Now we have to bring out the actors, the plants themselves. And Ponomareva breaks their needs down into a holy trinity of growth: energy, bricks, and mortar.
It's a fantastic framework because it makes it so easy to understand. To build biomass to physically grow a new leaf, a plant needs these 3 distinct inputs. And if any one of them is missing, the factory shuts down completely.
Let's start with element 1, light. This is the energy. And I think the biggest misconception here, the one that causes the most algae, is that light is food.
Right. People think if they add more light, they're feeding their plants more. Light is not food. You don't feed plants light. Light is the electricity that runs the factory. It provides the raw energy to process the food, which is the carbon and the minerals.
So if you crank up the electricity, the light, but you don't provide the raw materials for the factory,
you just burn out the motor, you create a ton of energy that the plant can't use, and that excess energy is what algae feeds on.
And she gets really technical about this. She talks about moving beyond old rules of thumb like watts per gallon.
Oh, that's completely archaic now with LED technology.
Yeah.
Watts just measures how much electricity the bulb consumes from the wall, not how much useful light it actually puts out. We need to think in terms of PAR, photosynthetically active radiation. How many photons are actually hitting the leaf?
But even more interesting is her deep dive into the spectrum, the actual color of the light.
Right. And this is where human bias really gets in the way. Our eyes, human eyes, evolved to see green and yellow best. That's the peak of our visual sensitivity, right in the middle of the spectrum. So when we go to the store and we look at a light that seems really bright to us, It's usually because it's pumping out a massive spike of green light.
But the plants are green, which means...
They reflect green light. They don't use it. It's the one color they bounce away. That's why they look green to us. Plants primarily need two colors to photosynthesize. Blue light, which is down around 400 to 470 nanometers, and red light, up at 600 to 680 nanometers.
So a light that looks super bright and pleasing to my eye might actually be a dim, starving environment for a plant if it's missing those critical red and blue peaks.
Exactly. You could have a light that's visually dazzling but is starving your plants energetically. And there's a specific physics problem with red light that she points out. Red light has a long wavelength and relatively low energy, and it gets absorbed and scattered by water very, very quickly.
Attenuation.
Yes. Red light is significantly attenuated or weakened within just 20 to 30 centimeters of water depth. That's less than a foot.
Whoa, wait a minute. So if you have the deep tank, say a 2-foot, 60-centimeter deep tank, the plants at the very bottom are literally living in a different light world than the plants at the top.
A completely different world. The red light might not even be reaching them at all. They're living in an almost exclusively blue world down there.
And that explains so much. That's why it's so hard to grow red plants or carpets in deep tanks.
That's why deep tanks need significantly brighter lights overall, or lights with a very strong blue spectrum, because blue light has more energy and it punches through the water column much more effectively. That's why the deep ocean looks blue, by the way. All the red and yellow light is gone in the first few meters.
That makes total sense. Now, what about duration? The photoperiod. How long should the sun shine in our little universe?
This connects back to a really simple question. Where do our plants come from? Most common aquarium plants are tropical. They come from regions around the equator.
So really consistent days. No long summer days or short winter days.
Very consistent. 10 to 12 hours of light. That's it. That's what their biology is programmed for. But here is the danger zone. Algae, our ancient enemy, are often local or temperate organisms. They are perfectly adapted to our long summer days. They love 14, 16 hours of light.
Uh-oh. I see where this is going. If you leave your tank lights on for 16 hours, thinking more is better for your tropical plants.
You are actually telling the tropical plants, okay, party is over, go to sleep, because they shut down chemically after about 12 hours. A process called photoinhibition sets in. They can't use any more light. But you are sending a loud and clear signal to all the algae spores in the tank. It's the longest day of summer. Time to bloom.
You are creating a paradise for algae, not for plants.
An absolute paradise. Stick to the tropical rhythm. 8 to 10 hours is plenty for most tanks.
Got it. Okay, that's energy. Now, element 2 of the Trinity, carbon, the building block.
This is the big one. This is arguably the most overlooked element by beginners. Plants are 40 to 50% carbon by dry weight. It is the literal backbone of every single organic molecule they build. Cellulose, sugars, proteins. It's all just long chains of carbon atoms.
And in a sealed glass box, carbon is incredibly scarce.
In nature, water is always flowing. New water brings new dissolved CO2 constantly. In your aquarium, the plants can suck every last molecule of available CO2 out of the water in just a couple of hours. Once it's gone, growth stops dead. The factory grinds to a halt.
So we have to add it back in. The source mentions compressed gas as the gold standard.
It is, without a doubt. You have a tank of CO2, a regulator to control the flow, and you bubble it into the water. It gives you total precise control, and you can put it on a timer so it shuts off at night, which is crucial because plants don't use CO2 in the dark.
But she also talks about liquid carbon. I've seen bottles of this in stores. It's often marketed as liquid CO2. But CO2 is a gas at room temperature. How can it be liquid?
It can't. That's very clever and slightly misleading marketing. Ponomareva explains that these products are usually based on a chemical called glutaraldehyde.
Glutaraldehyde. That sounds like something you'd find in a hospital, not an aquarium.
It is. It's actually used as a high-level disinfectant to sterilize medical and dental instruments that can't be autoclaved.
Seriously. And we're putting that in with our fish.
In very, very low, carefully controlled doses, yes. It's an organic molecule, and it turns out that plants have the ability to break it down and assimilate the carbon from its structure. It's not as efficient as pure CO2 gas, but it is a source of carbon.
So it's a carbon supplement.
Yes. But here is the deep dive bonus benefit.
What?
Because it originates as a powerful disinfectant, algae hate it. It acts as a mild algicide.
How does that work?
Higher plants have a much thicker cell wall and complex tissues, so they can tolerate low doses. But algae, being single-celled or very simple structures, get absolutely hammered by it. Their cell walls are easily breached.
So when you dose liquid carbon, You're giving your plants a carbon snack and poisoning the algae at the same time. It's a double whammy.
Exactly. It's never going to give you the explosive growth that pressurized CO2 can, but as a tool for algae control in a lower tech tank, it's fantastic.
Okay, that covers energy and bricks. Element 3, minerals. The mortar.
This is your classic fertilizer. Ponomareva divides them into two simple groups, macros and micros. Macros are the big bricks, the stuff plants need in large quantities. Nitrate, phosphate, and potassium.
And micros are the nails and screws.
The nails, the screws, the mortar. Iron, magnesium, manganese, boron, and so on. You only need tiny trace amounts, but if even one of them is completely missing, the whole wall falls down. And this brings up a crucial concept from biology called Liebig's law.
I love this concept, the law of the minimum. It applies to so many things in life, not just aquariums.
It really does. Imagine you're building a barrel. The barrel is made of wooden staves, but each stave is a different length. One stave represents light, another CO2, another nitrate, another potassium, and so on. The capacity of that barrel, how much water it can hold, is not determined by the longest stave. It's determined by the shortest stave. You can have infinite light, a really long stave, infinite CO2, infinite nitrogen. But if you have zero potassium, the shortest stave...
If the water just pours out at the potassium level, the barrel can only fill up that high.
Exactly. The plant stops growing completely. Growth is dictated by the single scarcest resource, not the most abundant one.
So you can't just blast your tank with light and CO2 and expect growth if you're starving them of, say, iron. You're just accelerating the starvation process.
Precisely. You're flooring the accelerator with no gas in the tank. And this is why she recommends using indicator plants.
A canary in the coal mine.
A perfect analogy. You plant some fast-growing species, like a hygrophila or a rotala. Because they grow so fast, their demand for nutrients is huge, and they show deficiencies first. If your fast growers start turning yellow, a condition called chlorosis, you know you have a nutrient deficiency long before your slow-growing anubias even notices there's a problem.
It's an early warning system built right into your aquascape. That's smart. This transitions us perfectly to the battlefield. Section 4. The war. Plants versus algae.
And the very first thing Ponomareva says in her seminar is, stop calling it a war. Stop thinking about fighting algae.
But algae is the enemy. It's the villain of the story. It ruins the view, it covers the glass, it chokes the plants.
It does all of those things.
Yeah.
But you have to respect your opponent to understand it. Algae are ancient. They have been on this planet for 3.5 billion years. They are perfectly, exquisitely adapted to living in water. They were the first ones in the pool.
And our beautiful aquarium plants.
They are secondary aquatics. They're newcomers. Most of them evolved on land. That's why they have stiff stems to fight gravity and complex root systems to find nutrients in soil. And then evolutionarily, they migrated back into the water.
So they're basically land plants trying to make it in a water world.
And algae has the massive home field advantage. Algae are opportunists. They can live on almost nothing. They just float around as spores waiting. They wait for a stumble, a missed CO2 dose, a temperature spike, an ammonia spike from a dead fish you didn't see, and then boom, they bloom.
So how do we beat a 3.5 billion-year-old survivor that's perfectly adapted to the environment?
You don't beat them with poison. You outcompete them. But, and this is the core idea, not just by eating their food. Ponomareva discusses a concept called allelopathy. This is chemical warfare.
This sounds intense.
It is. The biosynthetic dominance theory suggests that when higher plants are growing rapidly, when their metabolism is healthy and firing on all cylinders, they actively release biochemicals into the water. Things like phenols and other allelochemicals that suppress the germination and growth of algae spores.
Wait, so healthy plants are actually secreting their own natural algaecide into the water?
Exactly. They are staking their territory. They are broadcasting a chemical signal that says, I am growing here, this is my space, back off. But, and this is the absolute key, they only do this when they are growing healthily. If they stop growing because they ran out of potassium, remember Liebig's law, they stop shooting, they stop producing these defensive chemicals.
And the moment they stop shooting,
the algae swarm in, they sense that metabolic weakness instantly. That is why the best advice is never buy a poison to kill the algae. The advice is always fix the plant growth. If the plants are growing well, the algae will disappear on its own.
So the plants aren't just decorations. They are the biological filter, and they are the army that protects the tank.
All at the same time. Precisely.
Okay, we're entering the final stretch here. Section 5. The ecosystem in motion. This is about filtration and flow. Now, I always thought flow was, just about blowing fish poop into the filter intake.
That's the sanitary function, and it's important, but there is a much more critical physics function.
Yeah.
Ponomareva brings up a concept called the plant-wool boundary layer.
Okay, physics alert, break this down. What is a boundary layer?
Imagine a single plant leaf underwater. Basic fluid dynamics, friction, dictates that the water directly touching the surface of that leaf is moving slower than the water an inch away. In fact, there is a microscopic layer of water hugging the entire surface of that leaf that is essentially stagnant. It's perfectly still. It's a dead zone.
So even if the water rushing past a centimeter away is full of nutrients and CO2, the water that's strictly touching the leaf is empty.
Exactly. The plant absorbs the nutrients in that tiny boundary layer, depletes it in seconds, and then it starves. It is sitting in the middle of a buffet, but it can't reach the food because of this invisible stagnant barrier.
That's a huge problem. So how do we fix it?
Velocity, flow. If the water flow in the tank is strong enough, it physically scours that boundary layer away, or at least thins it out dramatically, and it constantly refreshes the water that's directly against the leaf surface.
So flow isn't just about cleaning the tank, it's about spoon-feeding the leaves.
You are force-feeding the plant. This is why you see the best aquascapers talking about flow all the time. If your flow is too low, your plants will starve in the midst of plenty. It completely changes how you think about positioning your filter output pipes. You need to see all the leaves in the tank swaying, just gently.
But there's a dilemma here, right? A conflict with the surface. We need good flow, but we also just paid a lot of money to inject all that expensive CO2 into the water.
Right, and gas exchange happens at the surface. If you have a waterfall or a lot of splashing and churning at the surface, you are degassing the tank. You are driving all of that precious CO2 right out of the water and into the room.
But on the flip side, if the surface is perfectly still, like glass,
You get that disgusting bacterial film, that oily-looking scum, and that film is bad because it blocks oxygen exchange from the atmosphere into the water.
so what's the balance? How do you solve that?
Gentle ripples. You want the surface to be constantly moving, to shimmer like a quiet stream, but you don't want it to break or splash. It's a very delicate balancing act between keeping oxygen coming in and keeping CO2 from gassing out.
And finally, she mentions a really counterintuitive trick about night versus day that surprised me. She says to turn on an air stone to add bubbles at night.
Yes. This is absolutely crucial for high-tech, heavily planted tanks. Remember, plants photosynthesize during the day. They take in CO2 and they release oxygen. We all learned that in school.
Right, they make oxygen.
But at night, when the lights are off, they switch, they respire, they breathe just like we do. They take in oxygen and they release CO2.
So at night, in the dark, the plants, the fish, and all the bacteria in the filter are all competing for the same limited supply of oxygen.
Correct. And in a very heavily planted tank, oxygen levels can drop to dangerously low levels at 4 in the morning because everything is consuming it at once. And if oxygen drops too low, your beneficial bacteria in your filter can stall or even die off.
So turning on a simple air stone on a timer that's opposite to your lights prevents the whole system from suffocating overnight.
It keeps the oxygen levels high so the bacteria can keep processing waste 24/7, and the fish wake up refreshed and not gasping at the surface. It just resets the system for the next day of photosynthesis.
It's just amazing how dynamic this whole system is. It's not just set it and forget it. It's this constant rhythmic cycle.
Not at all. It breathes. It really does.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's bring it all back to that God complex idea from the beginning. We aren't just keeping a pet in a box.
No. We are managing a microcosm. We are managing the invisible to enjoy the visible. We're worrying about bacterial colonies and photon wavelengths and boundary layers and cation exchange capacity, all so that we can sit on the couch and enjoy the lush green leaves. We are, in a very real sense, the engineers of a tiny world.
Ponomareva really drives home that this is a living entity. It changes, it ages, it has moods and rhythms.
And there is a final thought from her source material that I found really, really provocative. She mentions that scientifically, at the most fundamental molecular level, we don't even really know where the line between living and non-living matter truly lies.
That's deep.
It is. And in our glass boxes, we are observing a 3.5 billion-year-old struggle. Ancient life, the algae versus complex life, the plants. We're watching chemistry become biology in real time. And she poses the question: if we can't fully control a 50-liter box of water, if we struggle to balance the variables in such a tiny enclosed space, what does that say about our understanding and our ability to manage our own planet?
We're trying to play God in a shoebox. And even that is barely manageable most of the time.
It's a very humbling hobby when you think about it that way. It teaches you a profound respect for nature's complexity.
It really is. So
Yep.
for everyone listening, the next time you look at your tank, don't just check if the fish are hungry. Look at the flow patterns on the leaves. Think about the color of your light. Think about the silent bank vault working away in the dirt. You are the engine of that world. Keep it running.
Keep it balanced.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you in the next microcosm.